Welcome to the Cowtown Cats Lacrosse Podcast, where we talk all things Panther City Lacrosse Club. Now here are your hosts, Nicholas and Andy.
Well, Panther City came off the bye, looking to get back on the right track with a Friday game against Toronto right before Christmas. Welcome everyone to the Cowtown Cats Lacrosse Podcast. I'm Nicholas, of course, joined by Andy.
Hello.
Andy, this was the first ever meeting between Toronto and Panther City, which I know is something the league was looking at and hoping to do with these more unified standings and no divisions. You know, get these first-time matchups and get unique matchups in return.
Yeah, absolutely. This is not a matchup you really would have seen much of in the old East and West format. And it's great for fan bases around the continent because it allows them to see teams that they otherwise not get an opportunity to. Like we've talked about before, this season we get to see Toronto and Buffalo and Halifax, which wouldn't have happened on an annual basis prior. So it'll be fun, and it could definitely help foster new rivalries, which that almost might have happened in this game. We'll go into that a little later.
I was about to say, you and the broadcasters touched on that a little bit. But yeah, I mean, the first time meeting against each other, we kind of talked about it a little bit in our preview. I didn't really think this would be the first big test for Panther City, but I did know that Toronto coming off, their loss against Buffalo in the playoffs last year, it kind of leaves a sour taste in your mouth when you lose to the eventual champs. But we know Toronto's a good team. They've been a strong team out east. And so coming in, it definitely kind of was a test of where we are as a team early on in the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And just from what I've seen and read about them prior, they don't really have any distinguishable flaws. They're pretty good in all areas. And some of those areas happen to play right into our weaknesses. For example, Toronto, their first game of the season, they went 18 of 22 on face-off. T.D. Erlin was one of the league's best face-off specialists. I think he was one of the ones voted in the top 7 or 5 or however many by the league. Meanwhile, Panther City against Vegas in that tough loss, we went 4 of 24 for a 1/6 success percentage. And, both teams have faced losses and additions over the offseason. Legendary player Dan Dawson retired as the all-time leader in games played, second all-time in assists. But even with that, Toronto still has plenty of firepower.
Oh, yeah, and we'll get into some of that firepower throughout this rundown. But as you mentioned, Panther City coming off that overtime loss to Vegas, they were really trying to, hey, we're back home. We had a bye week. We had time to think about it and improve. And, honestly, right off the bat for this game, I thought they did a pretty good job. I mean, we started right off in the first quarter. You talked about, maybe a future rivalry between Toronto and us. I mean, there's very physical play right off the bat. 2 fights, within the first few minutes.
Yeah, that was pretty crazy. And I think Patton came out a little worse for the wear in his skirmish with, I don't remember who it was, but yeah, he was, from where we were in the stands, you could definitely see a little bit of red on his forehead.
Well, yeah, and that, for me, it just seemed like they were trying to send a message early on. Hey, we know you're a good team. We're not going to get pushed around. But that actually led to a power play, for us. And, again, I think we've done pretty good on power plays so far this year. We're really good at keeping the ball down there, getting rebounds, and it paid off. I mean, that power play led to Caputo getting a goal early on. We're up 1-0.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even before that goal, right before it, I think we got like 2 or 3 offensive rebounds in a row, which is great to have, especially if you're playing man up on offense.
Well, yeah. There's definitely some aspects on both defense and offense that I think we've improved in the offseason. And getting rebounds and fighting for that ball while we're in the offensive end is something that we really improved on this season. So that was really good to see. Not only that, but talking about defense, David was making some solid saves early on too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of one-on-one stuff where the offensive player on Toronto was able to get past our defender, and Damian stood strong. He was moving well laterally, going down low for a lot of good saves as well.
Yeah, but Toronto was able to get in pretty close. And they ended up scoring, tied us up 1-1. I mean, still felt like it was a pretty close game back and forth at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Both teams are playing pretty aggressively defensively, so there wasn't a ton of early scoring. Dan Craig's dunk where he kind of caught Damude, not sleeping, but just off guard since he came from behind the net was impressive to get things tied up. But yeah, just based on those first few minutes, you could tell that it was going to be a real tough battle.
Well, yeah, and even for Panther City, we were fighting tough. Goodwin, I mean, he got a great goal. A few minutes later, we go up 2-1. Honestly, his effort in getting that goal was something I noticed. It was just, it's like he didn't give up on it. He was bound and determined to get that goal.
Yeah, and it was nice to see that goal come in transition early on in the game, just because it kind of helped set the tone and kind of improving in an area that hasn't quite been there to begin the season as much as it was last season. So seeing Tony Malcolm get it to him for the feed, and not just the score, but Brandon Goodwin's first score for Panther City was really good to see.
Yeah, well, and it came at a good time, putting us up 2-1. We didn't get to see it. I guess so for us watching. A little quick rundown. I mean, you were able to go to the game this week again. For work restrictions from my end, I was not able to attend. But during the commercial break, that's when they came back and they were like, "Oh, power play for Panther City." There was an illegal substitution, so we didn't even get to see it happen on TV. But it gave us another power play and Messenger, which, by the way, today's his birthday, so happy birthday, Evan Messenger.
Yep,
but
happy birthday, Evan.
He got the loose ball. I mean, great play by him. Gets another goal. We go up 3-1. I mean, I'm like, hey, that's a great start for us.
Yeah, that was an amazing effort by Messenger. He picked up the Lucy, and it was unassisted. He just was able to run it down and got a nice bouncing goal past Nick Rose for his first score of the season. So early on, Goodwin in transition, Messenger in transition, and transition. I guess a double whammy because it was a power play transition move. So yeah, really good to see from the offense early on.
Yeah, and that's the kind of things that I expected to see coming off that bye week is like, hey, all those offensive struggles we had, let's fix those. And I thought that early on, especially, it seemed like we were fixing them, for our side. But Toronto, they're a good team. They kind of shook off that bad start. Gets another goal. They keep it close, 3-2.
Yeah, Chris Bushi was able to snipe the right side. It almost looked like, it's weird. It seemed like it somehow rolled off Damude's arm in such a way that it angled back in towards the goal. Like, had it not hit him, the trajectory seems like it would have just hit into the side of the field, but that wasn't the case. So good job by him. Thankfully, we were still up for a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, Damude's been kind of on the bad end of some some bad balls spinning the wrong way or going the wrong way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But they kept it close, 3-2. And at that point, I wrote this in my notes. It kind of seemed like the offense, I don't know if they started getting like antsy or uneasy or what the deal was, but there was a lot of just not very clean passes. They kind of, I don't know, unorganized, I guess is the best way you could say it. It just felt like they were at that point, even though we were up by one, I don't know if they were just trying to push it too much. I don't know. It just felt like they were kind of uneasy at that point.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Something about certainly in 5-on-5, there were times where the offense seemed discombobulated. I think you probably saw a lot of passes where either the receiver took his eyes off the ball too early or was trying to get into his move too early, and so he wasn't able to catch it cleanly, or it like bounced off or completely missed him. And thankfully, we kind of gave Toronto a bit of that on the other end as well. They were missing high on a lot of their shots, likely off of pressure or deflections from Panther City defenders. But yeah, Panther City offensively, the passing was real inconsistent throughout. And even though we were up 3-1, as we mentioned, 2 of those were power play goals, 2 of those were in transition, which you love to have, but you'd also like to see your regular offense and guys like Crawford and Will Malcolm and Donville get going.
Yeah, I also wrote in my notes there was at one point, Sheridan was trying to take on 4 defenders at the same time. I'm like, again, man, that's calm down. I know you're trying to prove a point in your rookie season, but come on.
Yeah, I do like the moxie in him. But for a rookie, it's almost like Goat last year. He's not afraid of mixing it up.
Oh no, I don't think he's. It's needless to say, I don't think he's afraid of much so far this season. But we talked about that. The bad passes led to just uneasy play, which ultimately led to Toronto getting a hold of the ball, and then a great transition goal by them. Toronto 3-3. It was a good start, and I wish it could have kept going in that first quarter. But again, Toronto is just such a good team. You can't just get away with sloppy play and not expect to, be ahead by a lot.
Right. Speaking of Toronto's goal to tie it up at 3-3, Damude is a very good goalie. However, regardless of how good your goalie is, whether it's Damude, Nick Rose, Del Bianco, Matt Vink, whoever you've got in there, you don't want to put them in situations where they're having to go one-on-one with a capable scorer who's wearing a lawless pads and can use their agility to their advantage, as opposed to heavily padded goalies stuck in the net. So when Justin Martin scored that as a result of the offense's sloppy play, that's where everything is connected in the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, like you said, no matter who the goalie is, it's always hard when it's one-on-one like that because, yeah, like you said, the player against the goalie, they have the ability to kind of move wherever and shoot wherever, whereas the goalie, it's like, you just don't know, and sometimes you get lucky, and other times not so much. But it's just It makes it that much harder.
Yeah, it's just the nature of playing a reactive position where you're having to react to the offense.
Well, after they tied it 3-3, that's when I started noticing, and you mentioned it early on. Man, we're losing a lot of face-offs, and because we lost that one, which led, to Toronto getting a lot of offensive pressure on us. Thankfully, our defense kind of tightened up towards the end of the first, and actually it ended up leading to us getting the hold of the ball right before the end of the first quarter. We get a goal up 4-3, but again, it's one of those, like, here's a little bit of negative, here's a positive, but here's a little bit of negative that goes along with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Coach TK, Toll, and Gowns, I think they kind of acknowledge that, yeah, we're in a tough spot with face-offs currently, with Tyler Burton being out. And so, okay, if there's a pretty good chance that we're not going to win these, then the defense has just got to be able to get back in transition really well. So that's one thing that did look solid early on. And like you said, on the flip side, it led to Jonathan Donville basically zooming right off the bench as the substitution and going in for the quick score, cutting straight to the net.
Yeah, and it was good momentum ending the first. We obviously started great, kind of fell off halfway through, and then ended well. But going into the second quarter, Toronto, I mean, again, they were playing very physical. It seemed like times they were just pushing us around, especially when we're trying to play offense down there. We try to get close, and they would just shove us back, 10 or 20 feet.
Yeah, the refs definitely. They called the obvious penalties in the first quarter when guys were engaged in fisticuffs and whatnot. But yeah, they weren't blowing a lot of whistles there for a while. And Damude was, again, just like in the first, he was making pretty good saves left and right. And that was great for us, but Toronto was definitely kind of beating up on us there for a bit.
Right, and that it eventually kind of starts to wear down. I mean, Toronto got a goal that tied us with them 4-4, and then honestly, not long afterward, I mean, they got another goal. It seemed like within a few minutes, it was one goal and then another goal, and that gave them their first lead of the game, up 5-4.
Yeah, their physicality was getting tough for our guys to match in that second quarter. Mitch Desnu used a great screen. I don't remember who got picked off, but he used it to basically get one past Damude in what's kind of a goalie blind spot, if you will, having to look past the pick. That goal right after, where Toronto, they basically won a scrum for a loose ball. I think they forced a turnover on one of our guys, and Chris Bushi had a really good spin move past Patrick Foley, where he was right in front of the net and Damude, and was able to roll off of Foley's shoulder, kind of like almost like a basketball or a receiver trying to get open.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Able to score.
Huh. It just seemed like it was once they got one score, then it was like, okay, now they know what they're doing, and another score, and then right after that, it was just again more bad passes by us, which led to Toronto getting the ball, and they got a great bouncing. They called it, it's a bouncing goal, but I mean, it was almost during a transition, you could say. I think it was because our defense didn't get there in time, but I don't know. It's like one after another, and our lack of clean play didn't help out.
Yeah, and Coach Sawyer, he got the interview right at the beginning of the quarter, I think. He was as cool as a cucumber, seems, hearing him talk. Coach TK is the one to get more fired up. It seems like the Rocks coach is a bit more kind of subdued and whatnot. He's like, oh, we're vets, we're off to a shaky start, but we'll clean things up. And credit to him and the team. He was right. Phil Mazuka had that 5-hole goal on Damude that you mentioned in transition to push the lead up to 2. And yeah, they were just taking advantage of those passes that just weren't crisp and real easy to pick off or deflect. But yeah, I don't know why it looked the way it did, because I don't remember. It
might have been worse than it seemed. At least I thought it was worse than it seemed, maybe. But you almost, against these teams that are in that upper echelon, you have to play clean. You can't. Yeah. You can't just, I don't know, what's the best word? Loosey-goosey. You be loosey-goosey with it. Because it leads to turnovers, and it leads to sloppy play, and that's how they take advantage of it.
Yeah. Playing loosey-goosey will lead to loosies.
there you go. Right. I didn't mean for that to happen. My bad. But yeah, I mean, and speaking of even our defense, like, again, I thought Damude overall was playing good until that, up to that point. And honestly, I think he played good throughout the whole game. We'll talk about that more at the end, but it just, like, the offense turning it over, and then the defense just being pushed around almost by Toronto's offense. Not only is it them going up 6-4, they also got another goal where I can't remember who it was on that one, but he literally just like pushed by Medeiros and got a goal, and they went up 7-4.
Yeah, that was Challen Rogers that scored on him, and it's like, Medi's one of the more physical guys that gets in your face on the team, and so for him to just be kind of cast aside to allow for another goal wasn't great to see.
Yeah, and we'll touch about Josh later, because there's something going on there, and I don't know what it is, but we'll talk about that because something does come up later on in the game I want to touch on. But yeah, at that point it's 7-4. It seems like it's all Toronto. But the man, the myth, the legend, of course, Will Malcolm, he decided, it's time for me to step up. He got a good goal. Puts us 7-5, at least within striking distance. He's not letting Toronto run away with the game at that point.
Yeah, it was funny. After they went up 7-4, I thought, oh man, well, it's unlikely, but it'll be amazing if we could tie it back up going into the half. That didn't happen, but at that point, we just needed to see something going. And so for Will Malcolm to score from the top past one of the elite goalies of the game, and Nick Rose, that was good to see, and gave us a little bit of momentum heading into the half.
Right, and so did you watch the rebroadcast?
Yes.
Okay, so right after that, they showed we lost another face-off, and at that point, they showed the stats so far. Yes. 13-1 in favor of Toronto. again, I mean, I think we touched about not last week, but the week before about how the face-off isn't going to make or break a game, but it was definitely something that was not helping us do anything.
Yeah, yeah. It's weird because, like you said, it won't make or break. But when the discrepancy's that that large, so where you've only won on 1 out of 14, then well, it's certainly not going to help. That's for sure. No matter how good your defense or goalie is.
Right, and so I mean, yeah, we'll talk about it after the game, but right before halftime, we almost got another goal, which was like 10 seconds left before halftime. So that I think going into halftime, we felt good about ourselves. Like we were only down by 2. We didn't let Toronto just run away with the game. I mean, because obviously we've seen some games where it's like the team runs away with it in the second quarter, and next thing you know, we're down by 4 or 5. But we were only down by 2. My thought on it, I mean, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't good. I mean, what were your thoughts about that first half?
Definitely was hoping for a stronger finish. That would-be goal by Ryan Sheridan. I remember there being just a collective groan in the stands because you just thought, oh, it just nailed the side pipe and didn't quite make it in. But it was nice to see that level of aggression. The thing that I noticed was that Callum Crawford was shut out in that first half. He might have had an assist, but he didn't have any goals. And then we've touched on it a little already, but Medi and Tony Malcolm weren't able to get anything going. That being said, at least transition did have a few bright moments because 3 of our 4 first half goals were in transition, just not by the usual suspects. You had, Goodwin, Messenger, and Donville. Yeah, arguably Donville. They all got transition goals. So it was nice to see that, though. There was a feeling of like, when is Medeiros and when is Tony and when is Showtime? When are they going to wake up?
Well, and at this point, we were so used to, Crawford having at least, like you said, like at least a goal or, multiple assists or something going on. And yeah, he just kind of played more of the background that first half, which isn't bad. I mean, obviously that's, something you want to try to help the offense get going is get those other players into it. But yeah, I think, I don't know what was going on there, but yeah, going into halftime, 7-5, not too bad, but third quarter started. I've touched on it in 2 quarters straight. The offense just seemed all over the place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it didn't seem right throughout, and I know that. Well, with Crawford's hot start to this season and Medeiros is hot all of last season, how good he was. Teams are definitely looking out for those aspects of Panther City's game plan a bit more. So you just got to adjust to that. And the third quarter definitely started out shaky with that. Brent Mitchell got in a fight, which led to not 1, but 2 penalties.
Yeah, it was a 4-minute major, and the way they broke it up was pretty much like, well, if you score during the first 2 minutes, you still get another 2 minutes. And man, Mitchell for Toronto, that's somebody you got to keep an eye on this season because he came in, he scored, and then like a minute later scored again, and before you knew it, 2 power play goals, they're up 9-5.
Oh yeah, slight correction, Matthews.
Oh, Matthews, sorry. Yeah, Matthews.
Mitchell is our guy.
That's right.
Yeah, Mark Matthews was the guy that we were pretty lucky that he didn't really do much goal-wise in the first half, but once he hit that first one to start the third quarter, you're like, oh gosh, is the dam broken? Mm-hmm. How are things going to happen from there? And then Corey Small was set up soon after that for a power play goal of his own. So just having that double minor penalty on a single player really hurt us in terms of digging the hole deeper and doubling the deficit to 4.
Right. Well, and like you mentioned, it felt like the game was kind of slipping away. Yeah, at that point, it's like, okay, let's try not to let this get out of control. But thankfully, we got a power play soon after. Really good shots. I mean, you mentioned it earlier. Really good rebounds. It seems like Panther City has gotten better about that. But not really anything going in. But finally, right at the end of the power play, Will Malcolm again gets a goal, and kind of starts a little bit of a comeback streak for us. But he gets a goal, 9-6.
Yeah, and he even telling with the goal that he got, it was off a pretty nice Callum Crawford kind of look away assist to him from behind the goal, and so it was good in that it kind of helped to get both of those guys going a little bit more.
I will say this, and I meant to ask this a little bit earlier, especially since Crawford was kind of shut out in that first half. Do you feel like Toronto's defense, knowing Crawford has been kind of on a hot streak the first two games, do you feel like they focused any more on his side or maybe did things differently?
Yeah, I think there was a concerted game plan. They seemed to be denying him the ball a lot, and once he did get it, they would oftentimes come with a hard double or just the primary defender on him was real aggressive. So it probably it definitely disrupted what he normally likes to do because he's such a little bit of foreshadowing. He's such a good one-on-one talent with the ball. He's almost like a good scorer or receiver that you just can't do anything about. But put enough people on him, push him around enough, and it's going to make life hard for anyone.
Right. And yeah, I mean, it was just kind of, again, interesting to not see him as highlighted in the first half and into the third quarter. But, it lets other players have their opportunity to step up. And Will Malcolm, they stepped up. Right after that, Caputo got a goal, 9-7. I mean, it's like we're getting good goals at that point, and we're getting some turnovers from the defense as well that helped us.
Yeah. It was nice to see Phil get another one in there, and in 5-on-5 as well. Not related to power plays, because we generally think of him as the guy who gets right place at the right time, rebounds near the net, or will do his damage on power plays. But seeing him get one, I think it was kind of near the top, maybe the top left. Seeing him get that was really good, and those were our first consecutive goals since the first quarter, and definitely helped think, okay, we've got a chance to make this comeback.
Right, yeah. 2 points is a lot more manageable than 4 points or more, but yeah, and so 9-7. But again, I was watching on TV. I'm sure it was the same there. Toronto got really good, on offense, and almost they did get a goal, quote unquote, and then Coach TK challenged it, and I even saw afterwards. I'm like, it looked like it bounced off both the bars, and then bounced out. But they called it a score, and then they reviewed it afterwards. But Toronto almost getting that goal was kind of a blessing in disguise, because it kind of gave everybody a timeout to rest after that kind of just hectic first 5 minutes. But not only that, but the goal didn't count, so we're still close. 2 points away.
Yeah. I'm glad they called that Rogers would-be goal back, because even before that, in the first half, I felt like there was a decent percentage of balls hitting the side pipes or the top pipes on both sides. So I am very thankful that one wasn't called, because that would have killed the momentum from Caputo and Malcolm's goals in that third quarter, where we helped close the gap. So props to TK for recognizing that and throwing the flag out.
Yeah, it was a great challenge by him. Now, this is the part I want to touch on. So this is about, 3/4 of the way through the third quarter. Medeiros gets the ball, and it seems like he's on a fast break. It seems like hey, this would be a great chance for a good transition shot. And as we talked about last year, he led all transition players in goals. He was really physical, but for some reason he got to a certain point and then he pulled back. And he's like, this isn't, to me at least, this isn't the same player that I saw last year, and I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, he does seem to be a bit more passive. We saw some of that during overtime of the Las Vegas game, where he had the ball and he didn't seem, I don't know if it was just the confidence issue or trying to read the field, but he didn't know what to do with it in that moment, which eventually I think led to a turnover in the eventual Desert Dog score. Yeah, in this case, Toronto is a very good defensive team. That's one thing I noticed during the game that they get back on in transition defense very well, better than they get back in their 5-on-5 offense actually. So it's hard for teams to score in transition on them because of Nick Rose, who's a great goalie. 2, because of how quickly they're able to make those substitutions. That being said, I do agree that you'd want to see more aggression out of Medeiros when he's got the ball, and he has a decent chance of running past a few guys, or at least pushing some guys around to get off a decent look.
Yeah, and it seems, I don't know. It just seems to me like it's almost like the coaching or the off-season overthinking. Like you look at last season, you're like, oh, maybe I pushed it too much, or maybe I took too many shots that I shouldn't have, and maybe he's being a little bit more self-conscious about it this year. But yeah, it just seems like, I don't know, it seems like the switch hasn't flipped for him this year yet. So I hope that's something that changes in the coming weeks. But yeah, that was something I noticed, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I have to touch on that. But at that point, leading into the end of the third, I mean, there was effort by both offenses and defenses. I mean, it was a lot of back and forth, no goals, but a lot of back and forth. And it was good to see us, again, hang tough after giving up that big lead early and then kind of fighting back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seemed like even though we weren't necessarily scoring a whole lot at that point, that the defense was definitely making life hard for Toronto. I know Mitchell had a good stick check to prevent a clean shot at some point. Liam Patton forced a turnover at half court. I think it either led to it didn't lead to a over and back violation or an 8-second, because he was actually able to get them to turn it over. Sellers had a really good block attempt to force another shot clock violation. Uh-huh. At one point, Donville turned it over himself, but he had the moxie to go back and get the ball, and so props to him for not giving up on the play. And then Damude was doing what he could whenever the balls were coming at him. He had a good diving save, and he's gotten really good at that. I don't know if there's an actual term for it, but when he kind of like sits on the ball or squats down to catch it to prevent from getting 5-hold, he did a really good job.
Oh yeah, yeah, and you mentioned that move. Yeah, I saw that a few times too. I was like, oh hey, and I don't know if that's something he may have worked out in the off season too, but all that good back and forth. Actually, so we talked about the missing of Showtime right before the end of the third. Crawford almost got a goal, but his foot was on the line.
Yeah, man, when they showed that on the Jumbotron right after he got it, we were like, and then we're like, well, maybe that won't challenge. Oh no, there's a challenge flag. Yeah. But you at least like to see the effort level there. Mm-hmm. He's not one to shy away from taking shots when the opportunity arises.
Oh, don't worry. Showtime eventually does show up, but we ended the third 9-7. Again, I was glad to see Panther City fight back and not just let Toronto run away with it. And that even led into some, we touched on Damude, that led into the fourth quarter where, again, Damude was getting some really good saves. It's really good to see the defense continuing to improve. They're not perfect, but I believe that they've taken the right strides since the end of last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with that. They seem like a more consistent unit, especially compared to the end of last season, with Liam Burns getting traded and whatnot. And so they've been able to build some of that continuity. So it definitely helps out, and I'm sure Nick Damude appreciates it.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, he was playing pretty much solid throughout, I thought. Obviously just a few things here and there. But speaking of Showtime, Crawford, the top 5 plays just came out today, and it was number 1, and for good reason. Crawford, one-handed, going across the goalie with 2 defenders on him. One of them trying to block him, the other one had his other arm.
Yeah.
And Crawford, one-handed goal. The craziest thing I've seen so far this season. They 9-8 at that point.
Yeah, that was such a fun goal. It got the place really loud. Just seeing just all the elements to it. Like, okay, he's getting a double team. Okay, one of the guys is pulling on him. The other guy's kind of trying to sandwich him, get him in between. And he was like, I don't care.
Yes.
And just takes that ball in his, was it his right hand? I don't even remember.
I think it was his left hand, honestly.
Was it his left?
Maybe, yeah. But
Okay.
it was just like the wherewithal to defend off two people,
Yeah.
have the ball, and then, when I watched the replay, I mean, he even like tries to fake it a few times. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm gonna shoot.
Classic.
No, and then at the last second, I'm like, how do you defend that? Period.
Yeah. I bet that last goal of his getting called back probably fired him up a bit more than he even was. And so he had to one up himself yet again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. Top play contender for sure, but that, like you said, that really fired up the place. That fired up the players. Shortly after that, Pat Foley. Has he even had a goal this season yet? I mean, I think this is his first of the season.
He had one, I remember. I think he like tripped at the end of like the Vancouver game when the game was already out of reach for the Warriors. But yeah, it was nice to see him close the deal this time.
Yeah, awesome transition goal. I mean, honestly, if Crawford had defended off two people to get a goal, that was honestly a play of the night contender for me. But I mean, next thing you know, it's 9-9, and I'm like, all right, hey, that's great. Let's keep this going. And sure enough, we get a power play, and the GOAT, Gaucher, showed up. He gets a goal. 10-9. I mean, crazy.
Yeah, something about that. Those two rookies from last year, Donville and Goat, when they have some sort of connection to where Donville's able to find him for these quick strike goals right next to the net, and it was awesome to see some of that. Gave me glimpses or reminded me of last year's success. And like you said, the best thing about it was it gave us the lead back.
Yeah, and at that point, that was 5 straight goals by Panther City. So it's just it's stuff it's positives that you can come from anything. No matter what happens at this point, hey, we were down by 4, we fought back, and 5 straight goals in a row gave us the lead. I wrote down, things were starting to go our way, but I also put down, can we keep it going? Because at that point, there was still, I think, 5 or 6 minutes left in the game.
Yeah.
And 5 or 6 minutes is maybe a little bit too much time for a team like Toronto. I messed up on his name earlier, but Matthews, I think he just decided, he did a Callum Crawford. He decided, you know what, I'm just going to take over. He gets a goal, tied it up 10-10, and then literally 20 seconds later, we lose the face-off. He gets the ball, scores again. That's 2 goals in a row by him. And next thing you know, we're down 11-10.
Yeah, he definitely is their veteran leader on offense this season. I don't remember what season he's in, 8th, 12th. I don't quite remember, but yeah, that second goal that he got, where I think Tony Malcolm got kind of hit from behind, and you thought maybe the refs would call it, but nope, they let play on. I guess they considered it a clean pick, and that opened Mark Matthews up for his 3rd goal of the game. And so at that point, it was like, man, they have the lead again. Not only do they have the lead again, but Mark Matthews is woken up as well. So from that point on, it made an uphill battle even more tough.
It's like we accidentally woke up the beast,
Right.
Yeah, you mentioned about that pick. That happened a few times. It seemed like there was a pick, and like I always thought like, oh, hey, that should be a foul. And they didn't call it, but I don't know if they were just letting him play more at that point or what was going on.
Yeah. It would have been nice if they called it, but
yeah.
I mean, what are you gonna do? Box lacrosse is a tough game.
Yeah. Well, at that point, I mean, it was only 11-10, or 12-10, sorry, but it just kind of seemed like we kind of lost all of our steam, all of our momentum. They pulled Daymood. They got a goal going up 12-10, and then we pulled Daymood, kind of hoping for something to happen. I mean, they pulled him with like a little over a minute left, or a minute and a half left, and unfortunately, it led to a Toronto empty netter. I don't know. It's like it's like we played a good 3.5 quarters, and then it just kind of fell apart at the end there. And again, it's one of those things like you don't know exactly if it's one thing or another that happened, but just like I said, it just felt like we kind of lost our steam, and that eventually led to us losing 13-10.
Yeah, and it was kind of interesting that we got a Cam McLeod sighting at the very end there for a hot minute when I think it was right before Damu / the Panther City goalies got pulled for good trying to go man up on offense. But yeah, I mean, I'd even be a bit more pessimistic and say I think we played maybe 2.5 good quarters. And unfortunately, the way that the runs in this game worked out, Toronto was the team with the last run. It was, I think they scored 5 straight earlier. We had scored 4 or 5 straight between the third and the fourth, and then they scored the last 4. Not even counting the empty netter they got. They scored 3 to end the game to win by 2. So these are lessons you got to learn, and it was a good first look at what could be arguably the best team in the league right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're I hate to admit it, but they're right up there with Buffalo and those others. But I was like you mentioned, I was glad to see us fight back and to be able to come back on a very strong team like Toronto. But my final, my note I put right here, I feel like we could have had a fighting chance at winning if we didn't have all that sloppy play in the second and third quarter. And it's little things like that eventually lead to losses. It's not a big thing that happened the whole game. It's these little things that you need to tighten up on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, execution needs to be so precise against especially the elite teams in the NLL. And Toronto is one of those elite teams. They've been through a lot of battles over the years. They have an amazing goalie. They've got some great vets on both sides of the ball. So, like you said, tightening up those little finer details of a game for an entire 60 minutes is really imperative.
Well, and not to say that the East versus West, one side was tougher than the other in the previous years, but it did seem like your more juggernaut teams were out East. I mean, Toronto, Buffalo, like you mentioned, Halifax. I mean, these are all teams that just beat each other up every year. And over here, it just seemed like there's a few. There's, San Diego, maybe, and then there's Colorado, and then there's everybody else.
Well, last year, I know we obviously didn't play Buffalo, Toronto, or Halifax. Rochester is in are they in the... I always get Rochester and Saskatchewan mixed up because of their shades of green.
Oh, yeah.
But I know, I want to say Rochester was an Eastern team that we lost at home last season. But yeah, like you said, we got kind of lucky that the East teams that we did face last year were for the most part like Albany when they're trying to get things going over there, the Riptide, basically these other new teams that are trying to establish their identity. But here we go. Toronto is one of the inaugural teams in the league. They've got a long-standing tradition and history of success. So it's good to give us a measuring stick of where we eventually want to be.
Right. Well, it's something they can look back on, as the season goes on. Well, as we mentioned at the beginning, this was, of course, the first matchup between Panther City and Toronto, which, of course, comes with some first-time stats of the game. Mr. Andrew, what kind of stats do we have for our first ever meeting between Toronto and Panther City?
Well, you're not going to like a lot of these. But so we mentioned that in the overtime loss to Las Vegas, face-offs, we went 4-24 for a 1 out of 6 success rate. We did even worse this week. We went 2 for 28 total face-offs for a 1/14 success rate.
Don't sugarcoat it. I mean, you can be honest.
Yeah, I mean, Tyler Burton, get well soon, man. I hope things are going all right. As for the rest of the guys, again, they're not the end-all be-all, but yeah, just got to do the best you can while our specialist is out, and we'll go into some other options a little later on in here, but it's rough to see. I mean, you could... there was one fan in attendance, you could hear him say, like, please just win one face-off or something. So you can tell that the locals are kind of feeling it too, but hey, hopefully, you know, it has to get worse before it gets better. So hopefully we're going to turn that corner sooner rather than later. Beyond that, Toronto did have a slight edge in loose balls, 69-62. One thing that I found very interesting was they actually had 3 players with 10 loosies or more. TD Erlin, Mitch DeSnoo, and Josh Jubinville. I think Erlin led the way with like 14 or something, which is really impressive considering he's their face-off guy. Actually, maybe that contributes to why he had so many, because if he's not winning a face-off outright, then he's able to have the energy or the wherewithal to track the ball down soon afterwards. Beyond that, Donville and Crawford had relatively quiet nights shooting the ball. I'm sure they were a focus of the Rocks' game plan, but it is going to be hard to win when they combine for only 2 goals between them. Yeah, they had 1 each. I think they might have had 3 assists each, which is nice to see, but as good of passers as they are, having a bit more goals between the two of them would have been great. And lastly, Damiud played a pretty solid game, but I think he was ultimately outplayed by Nick Rose. I think Damiud, they each were met with around 52 or 53 shots on goal. We're not going to count that empty netter at the end, but Damiud's save percentage was 76% on 52 shots on goal, while Rose's was 81%. And I know Coach TK has mentioned it in the past that you really want that save percentage to be 80% or higher if you want to give yourself a realistic chance of winning. So hats off to Nick Rose. He's an amazing goalie as well. Damien's trying to get there in his young career, so hopefully he'll be able to achieve that goal.
Well, and you know, you said 80% is the goal. I mean, believe me, 76 isn't bad, but yeah, I mean, it's one of those things like, where can we tighten up here? Honestly, I'll say this. I hope that the rest of the defense, you know, continues to play solid, because I think that's where it ultimately helps him, like in the big picture of things. When the defense is playing solid, he's playing solid. When there's little cracks here and there or the stuff that they miss, that's usually when you get big shots on Damiud, and that's where, you know, goals go in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like we said before, it's all connected to each other. You want to make it so that the shots that your goalie is peppered with are going to be ones that he's got a chance of getting to before they cross the plane. So there were times when our defense was able to do that, especially, I think, in the third during that scoring drought between both teams. And then there were just some amazing plays by Toronto, like the spin move on Foley, and then Medeiros getting cleared out. But overall, hopefully they can get to a point where Damiud isn't kind of scrambling on an island trying to protect the net.
Well, that is, of course, Mr. Andrews' stats of the game. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see kind of how the year progresses, how that kind of improves for us, at least from the defensive side. Well, of course, that leads us to our cool cat plays of the game. This is a hard one for me. I'm going to give some credit to the Pat Foley transition goal, because it was just an awesome transition goal by him. Great effort. But I'm sorry, there can only be one. It's the top play of the NLL for a reason. I mean, for my play of the game, it's definitely Callum Crawford taking on 2 people and getting a one-handed goal.
Nice.
I'm sorry, that it just, you don't see that happen very often, if at all. And he makes it look so easy sometimes, and yeah. So my play of the game is definitely Callum Crawford. How about for you?
like you said, the Pat Foley goal in transition deserves some love. As he was shooting the ball, he was getting shoved from behind, so he basically fell down as he was shooting it. I wanted to give some love to Nick Damute as well. This might have been a stronger contender if it weren't for the way it finished. There was this one play where Damute was able to save the shot, and as he did, he lost his stick in the process.
Oh, yeah.
And Toronto got the ball right back. And as they shot it, Damien actually caught it and blocked it with his gloves. It was like, this is awesome. Damien is amazing. And then he tossed the ball to a defenseman.
Yeah.
And that apparently that's a violation.
The handball. You can't do a handball.
Yeah. And yeah, it's not something that I would have thought of, because you think of soccer and these other games where you're able to do that. But so that's one of my honorable mentions. And yeah, I kind of had to chuckle at the outcome of it. But it was two great saves by him in a roll. The second without his stick. However, I gotta agree with you. That Crawford one-hander was special. We mentioned that he had a quiet night, so that almost places this one on a more elevated status. And you can probably count the number of guys in the league that can do that night in and night out on one hand. And Showtime is one of them.
You're literally doing it on one hand.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, it's Showtime at his finest. He didn't have as many goals this game, but he showed up for sure. Well, that's of course our cool cat plays of the game. Leads us to our big cat players of the game. This one was tough for me because there wasn't really one, I would say, that stood above the rest. I mean, you could argue Daymud because he did play solid for most of the game. You could argue, Will Malcolm even. I guess I don't have a for sure one. If I was to pick one on the spot, I probably would say Will Malcolm, because this was a game where he did have a little bit more activity. He was involved in the offense more, and he did kind of step up when Crawford wasn't able to get things going early on. So for me, I would say Will Malcolm is probably my big cat player of this game. And I'll put an asterisk beside it, knowing that there wasn't just one that I think shined above the rest. But yeah, I wish there was something, I don't know, just anyone I could think of that would be like, oh, hey, they're the end-all be-all, player of this game, offense or defense for that matter. He's my big cat player of this game. What about for yourself?
I agree with you in that there wasn't any one player that stood out. You mentioned the usual guys that are usually in contention that put up the big numbers, like Donnie and Showtime were pretty quiet. You could even say Will Malcolm was kind of quiet by his standards from what we're accustomed to see. Again, credit to Toronto for all that. But I actually went the opposite direction and did kind of do a big cat player of the game by committee. On a night where it was really hard to come by 5-on-5 offense, I thought Brandon Goodwin, Evan Messenger, and Patrick Foley did a really good job, not only defending as well as they could have, but combining for 3 transition goals as well. Each of them was able to score. We've talked about the struggles we've had in transition this season. So them being able to do that and combining for 14 loosies, getting some caused turnovers as well, I think it's a step in the right direction overall for the team.
Yeah, and of course those are our big cat players of the game. Yeah, I feel like you're starting to see those other players contribute more. It seemed like the first 2 games it was 1 or 2 players. Now we're starting to see a couple more step up in certain spaces. So hopefully that's something we can continue to grow on as the year goes on. Well, as we look at this game, I mean, any final thoughts on the game against Toronto?
Well, they're a team without any glaring flaws. They've got an elite goalie. They're really good in defense. 5-on-5 and in transition, just getting back. The only thing I can think of was sometimes they get into their offense a little slow, but by the second quarter, they seem to not have any issues on that side as well. So they were basically able to expose Panther City's sloppy passes and just kind of uneven, not quite consistent play to survive their own offensive dry spells. So basically, they were a team that no real major flaws, so they're allowed a larger margin than error, and that's somewhere where Panther City, they don't have not necessarily the elite level of play, but they don't have the consistency to be able to allow those many mistakes, well, a lot of them at times unforced throughout an entire game.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll touch on this here in a little bit more, but in the broader sense, but Panther City definitely isn't where we thought they would be at this point. And this is another game where, just like the Vegas game, they need to take this information and they need to learn from it, and they need to, fix what needs to be fixed and get better at what they need to get better at. Because a team like Toronto, let's say you face them again in the playoffs, I mean, it's safe to say Toronto's probably going to get a top 3, maybe top 4 spot.
Mm-hmm.
And if we get in the playoffs, I would love to have one of those top spots and host a game. But realistically, at this point, we might be on the lower end. And so what's going to happen? We're going to have to go to one of those places. And, I don't know. It's frustrating, but at the same time, like, you just want Panther City to continue to improve, and they want to improve too. So it's definitely a game that I hope they take and they say, all right, let's move on from this, but also let's learn from this. Let's don't just shove it off to the side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it wasn't a game that didn't have any positives, but I will say, and we touched upon this last episode, I do think I would have felt more comfortable with this loss if it was the first loss of the season, because it makes that Vegas loss sting that much more. Because if we're going up against Toronto, one of these so-called elite teams, undefeated, then I think that we would be able to stomach a close loss a bit better. But because of that home overtime loss to the Desert Dogs, this one does feel like it stings a bit more.
Yeah. Well, and this will be my final thought on it, but you mentioned about Toronto. I feel like them and Buffalo, and you could probably even put like San Diego and maybe even Colorado. Well, not so much Colorado, because we've been able to beat them pretty consistently in the first 2 years. But those, upper teams, you mentioned it, like, we were able to stay strong with them maybe that first quarter, but once they downloaded and figured out, hey, this is where we need to improve on and change, it's like, without a second thought, that's what they did. And that's what those upper teams do. That's what those, higher seeded teams do. They're able to make those changes so fast in game that you just don't know what to do about it. So I hope that's something Panther City looks to improve on as well.
Yeah, here's hoping. And we haven't even touched upon, I don't know how a matchup like Albany is going to go this year with some of these sleeper teams that are going well. We'll get into Georgia a bit later, but I mean, it'll be an exciting season regardless. But obviously we want to see Panther City have as much success as possible.
I feel like without an East Division and a West Division, the weeds are thicker now. So
yeah.
Well, speaking of this game at Toronto, like I mentioned earlier, you were able to go and you were up in the press box. You actually got a lot of the behind the scenes. Got to see a lot of behind the scenes. But a part of that experience was you were there for the after game interviews, which we'll play those here in a minute. But just first of all, touch on just your experience with that with Panther City.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to give a shout out to Daniel from the Proud City podcast for kind of showing me the ropes of everything, where to go and whatnot. As far as the media row or media box, whatever you want to call it. So we were in the 200 section, which, although it is much further away from the field, gave you kind of a bird's eye view. So it was a lot easier to tell who was doing what. And plus the Jumbotron right in front as well. That's actually where they do from what I could tell, that's where they do the stat tracking for the game. Because there was definitely someone up there who was saying like number 98 with the assists to number 3 or whoever.
Oh, nice.
And whatnot. So it was kind of cool to see that sort of behind the scenes stuff. And then went down after the game. To be honest, I didn't even know that there was gonna be a post game conference, because lots of times after losses, the coaches and the players just want to shower and get home, so they don't have to think about the loss anymore. But thankfully they did. Usually Coach TK comes out and says a few words, followed by whichever player is willing to do it. Obviously, in a win, you'll probably have someone that had a lot of success do it. In a loss, you might get someone who's just not friendlier with the media, I guess you could say. And so I was able to interview Coach TK and Donville. I use the words interview loosely. I asked maybe 1 to 2 questions to each of them. But yeah, it was a really cool experience. They had the backdrop of the team. They're talking, so you basically get your question in. They give you their answer, and they gave really well thought out answers as well, which I appreciated. And also another shout out to Andy Esworthy, who kind of helped set things up for that. He was also coincidentally doing the play-by-play, right? Not
nice.
The play-by-play, but the color commentary during the replay. And so it's like, oh wow, pulling double duty.
Nice.
So yeah, it was me, the Proud City person, and then I think the social team that was in the post game as well. So yeah, really neat experience. I hope I remember everything and where to go once the next home game in more than a month that happens. Hopefully I can jog my memory by then. But yeah, it was really neat, and I think it'll help us give listeners a bit more access or a behind the scenes look of just how the team operates, the stuff that's going through Coach TK and players' minds after a game, whether it be a win or a loss. So yeah, overall it was a really, really cool experience.
Yeah, and something I hope we get to continue once they get back home. Well, yeah, so you first interviewed Coach TK. Here's what he had to say after the game.
Okay. Coach, this is Ty Thompson's first game with the team. Anything in particular stick out to you?
I liked his energy. I thought he did a really good job of just going out and banging. I would have liked him to shoot the ball a little bit more, but again, I thought he picked up some gritty loose balls and certainly brought a lot of energy, and again did exactly what we were looking for him to do. I would have wanted him to contribute a little bit more, by scoring. But for his first one with us, I thought it was okay.
And the transition game that was so successful last season is off to a shakier start this year. How much of that do you think is attributed to opponents just scouting for it and guys just possibly having early season struggles? Maybe a combo of both things.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I think we're certainly well scouted. We were successful last year, and even the year before that. People know that we like to run and we like to push pace. So certainly scouted on it, but I also think that we're getting away from it. Again, we're getting away from what has made us successful, and I don't know if it's about guys being content, guys being comfortable, but I thought we did a better job tonight on both sides of it, stepping up, and then again pushing the pace a little bit. We could have had a couple more in transition, I thought, but it took a step in the right direction tonight.
I mean, he kind of touched on it there, talking about Ty Thompson's first game. I mean, what did you kind of get the sense from him talking about all that?
It was nice to hear his words, just saying that, yeah, we know Ty didn't score, but it's not all about scoring, especially for someone that's new to the team. You want to see aggressive play. You want to see chemistry between him and his new teammates, and just fitting him in. And I think, just from my own opinion, it'll take time to gel, but it is nice having these bigger guys on the team. Like, God, Ty Thompson's, I don't remember how much he weighs, but guy is 6'6". So pair him with Knox and Sheridan, who are both 6'4" rookies, and you've got a bunch of size to dole out a bit of punishment on the offensive end.
Right, exactly. So yeah, it was good to see him on the field getting some playing time. And then you touched on about the transition game and just kind of where maybe we need to improve in that area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Coach TK definitely acknowledged it as well. Yeah. He probably more immediately saw the results in the game, whereas I think I didn't even realize, like, oh yeah, technically that was a transition opportunity by watching the replay and seeing Goodwin and Messenger and whatnot. So yeah, after he said that, it did kind of make me reflect that, oh yeah, we didn't win this game, and Josh Medeiros and Tony Malcolm might not have really put up big numbers, but it's definitely a step in the right direction and something that he felt positive about. Now, all that being said, there were no questions about face-offs.
On purpose?
Yeah, I think that was by design. It's like, we figured the team knows about it, and we know Tyler Burton's hurt right now. So let's just take positives where we can, if you will.
So maybe if it continues in the next 4 weeks and they're back home, maybe then we might have to.
yeah. We'll play it by ear. We'll see how this road trip goes.
Well, that's pretty awesome. You got to talk to Coach TK after the game like that, and then you said, after a loss like this, maybe a more a friendly voice to talk to. You got to talk to Jonathan Donville after the game. Here's what he had to say about the game.
Hey, John. Ty Thompson's first game tonight. I know Knox didn't play. What's it been like integrating Ty and new players in general into the offense?
Yeah, I thought Ty played well. Ty and I actually go back a little bit. We played together in Orangeville in Junior A. Won a Midland Cup together, so new but old for me. So I played with him. Great player. Obviously, 6'5", however tall he is. I thought he played well tonight, but I think our depth is something that's important for us, and when Noxie's time comes, he'll be ready to go. So I thought Ty played well. Not always easy. Hasn't been here that long, but he's done a really good job at getting back or getting in the flow and trying to learn as much as he can in a short period of time. Thought he played well, and whoever's name gets called on a given night, he's got to be ready to play. And obviously we wish the result was different, but I thought that happened tonight.
So yeah, I mean, you heard it there. He kind of talks about how him and Ty had some playing time early on in life. So it was good to kind of see them, get together again and kind of find that camaraderie as now he's a bigger part of the team.
And it does make me wonder as well how much Coach TK and General Manager Bob Hamley, how much they kind of look at player familiarity in terms of not just playing collegiately, but in Canada in the off season or maybe in the youth leagues when guys are still in grade school, how much of that can translate to professional chemistry and success with each other. So it's pretty cool, and it is kind of representative of the NLL really being a brotherhood or fraternity between these guys who have played lacrosse for a big chunk of their lives.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, like I said, it was good insight and obviously a friendlier voice, but it was good to see kind of behind the scenes with both Donville and Coach TK. But that, like I said, that's really awesome that you got to interview both of them. Well, I mean, you mentioned it before. We leave this game, this loss from Toronto, and we go straight into another bye week, unfortunately.
Yep.
But that's right before our 4-game road trip. So we don't even get to see Panther City again for another month and a half almost. And well, our next game is against the Georgia Swarm, who is ranked number 7 in the power rankings right now. And obviously some familiar faces on that team with the Thompson brothers. I mean, that's something we got to look out for in this next game.
Well, it'll be nice to see Jeremy Thompson again. but I don't know that we're necessarily going to be happy considering what his skill set was when he did for us, being the face-off specialist. Like, if we've been doing this poorly so far, I don't know that seeing him's really going to see much of an improvement. Though, oddly enough, Georgia beat Colorado pretty badly last week, despite not doing very well on face-offs. So, who knows? Yeah, I'd say I kind of expect guys like Crawford and Will Malcolm and Donville to get a bit back on track and put up more assists and goals between the three of them. But I mean, Toronto's picked up a lot of momentum from where they were last year. They had that slow start. I think they were like 1-7 at one point, but like ended up right at or just below 500. They had that long run to end the season. So I think that momentum is carried on into the beginning of this year, where they're 2-1 so far. Lyle Thompson, Jeremy's brother, is a great player. I think him and the rest of the team probably do enough to offset bounce back weeks by Showtime and Will. So this, I was optimistic last week against Toronto. I think this week, I'm going to say, well, I'll hold on my prediction. I'll let you talk about him and give us your thoughts first.
I mean, yeah, all I was going to say is just, Georgia is one of those teams that ended last season on a good run and started this season on a good run. I mean, that's why they're, number 7 in the power rankings right now because of their consistency. And, yeah, the Thompson brothers, I think, can be a little too much. But that being said, I think maybe our experience with them in the past maybe gives us a little bit of advantage on how to play against him. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's hard to tell, but yeah, I don't know. I see this game can be one of two things. It can either be a game where we learn from our mistakes and we start to, put those things together after this bye week, or we still make the same mistakes that we did against Toronto, which would obviously lead to not a very good showing by us. But yeah, I mean, expectations against Georgia for me is I really want us to have a bounce back game. I want us to have the type of game that, kind of what we had in the first week of the season, something that's just consistent and steady and something that we can just be like, that was good pretty much from beginning to end. Like, it might not be the best win. It might not blow the doors off of it, but if we play clean and we play consistent, that's honestly what I want to see. So I am going to say, you said you were going to hold off on your prediction. I'm going to say this is a win, and it's going to be an ugly win. So I'm going to say we win like 9-8. But it's a win that I think we need at this point.
Wow. Well, how the tables have turned. Normally you predicting the loss against tough teams and me predicting the win. I am actually predicting a loss that will be somewhat similar in the vein of this Toronto game. Hopefully with a bit less frustration from our perspective, but I do think Georgia will beat us by the margin of 14-10. As far as what I want to see, I would like to see continuity and consistent play, whether that be in things like the rotations and substitutions, crisper passes, being able to handle pressure from the defense, continual improvement in the transition game. Hopefully Medi and Tony can finally get off and get their games going. And despite what we mentioned about Jeremy Thompson earlier, hopefully kind of shoring up some of these faceoffs to at least improve upon these last two 1-6 and 1/14 or 1/14 kind of beatdowns we've suffered. Which reminds me, I know we signed Justin Joseph, a faceoff specialist out of Drexel in the offseason. I kind of wonder if the team's just thinking he's maybe still a bit too green for the box game to put him in, as I think he his specialty was probably field at Drexel, but I feel like we could use all the help we can get if we want to win some of these face-offs.
I mean, at some point, and again, I will trust Coach TK and I will trust the organization to make whatever decisions they need to make. But I do feel like at some point you do have to start trying things and just being like, I mean, that's what they did. Last game they were like, okay, let's change who's the face-off person, see if that changes anything. So at some point, I feel like you have to do something and just try it out. But
right,
yeah, I will say this. Yes, I hope we win a few more face-offs than one or two.
Yeah. Here.
Right. But so we'll unfortunately have to wait another week to see how that goes. Against Georgia, going into the new year. So we do have this bye week. Hopefully, Panther City can take this bye week, and again, kind of fix those problems that they had against Toronto. But during our bye week, we do have, a little bit of extra time, so we're going to do a kind of a top 5 countdown of our favorite moments from 2023. As everybody does this time of year. So I wanted to definitely touch on that and be sure to check that out in the next week. But as always, we thank you guys for listening. Be sure to check us out on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Check out our videos on YouTube. We have all of our full episodes and full videos on there. Once again, I'm Nicholas.
And I'm Andy.
And we'll see you next time.
Sweet. Cheers, y'all.